All right, welcome back. Another episode, Digital Recruiter Podcast. Very special guest today. Got Austin Moore with me, who is longtime recruiter, sales, B2B. He's accomplished a lot in the space and in business. He took a staffing company from 0 to 17 million annual recurring revenue in not that long of a time. I think about 3 years, which is nuts.
Yep.
Now he's strategic advisor and helps run strategy ladders, and in that piece of it with talent labs, helping recruiting agencies hire talent specifically focused in Latin Am. There's like a million things, so I'm just going to stop there and kind of dive into it, Austin. But thanks for being here, man.
You got it, man. I really appreciate the opportunity, Clark. Thanks.
Of
Thanks
course.
a lot for having me.
Of course, of course. Well, we're talking a lot offline, and we just kind of had to get this going. But for the people that might be newer to you, right, for the digital recruiter kind of audience, or maybe like break down exactly kind of like all encompassing like strategy ladders, talent labs, right, and then we'll kind of get into how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been here at Strategy Ladders for 2 years or so. I joined as a strategic advisor, and so I
Okay.
really worked with clients and companies that were just trying to grow and scale. That's it's a beast to take a company to a significant revenue level, both on your personal life, but also your professional life.
Mm-hmm.
It's a absolute game changer in terms of everything and the way you view stuff. It's a mindset game. It's a business game. It's a financial game. There's so many components of that's moving. And so, having done it myself, I joined here and I've been working with a lot of clients on how exactly to do that.
Yeah.
So everything from solving today's problems to looking at strategy for the next 6 to 12 months to offer development, sales, everything else. And through that work, we had a partner who was actually doing some recruiting for some of our clients, kind of a referral partner. But with my background, it made sense just to bring that in house. And so, as clients grew with us, it was very common for people to double or triple in size over the course of a year. They're going to need people to do that. And so we started Talent Labs and help a lot of those clients bring on folks. We filled recs in the US, we filled recs in Canada, but about 75% of what we do is bring in talent from Latin America to our clients as they try and scale.
I love it. I love it. How and for, I think that's where it reminded me to follow up with you. It's like I had a couple clients in particular that kind of like your name got brought up in terms of helping them, hire. Kind of they come to me for like the LinkedIn piece and opening up more doors and pipeline. And great, I'm busier now. I need help with delivery, and your name came up of like they were working with you and that you helped them like kind of hire the right talent and with the SOPs and all the stuff that kind of gets owners in trouble with hiring, especially recruiting agency owners and hiring a team and training them and what KPIs should be and all that good stuff. So that's kind of what I knew. I had to have you on here and share that story because there is so many different pieces of it. A lot of people have tried that piece of it and kind of get it wrong. I guess like how did you come to like get into this place of it and kind of have this be your specialty?
It's we've got a number of folks that are based out of Mexico City.
Yeah.
And there was just kind of this natural curve to realizing that while Latin America might not be the cheapest market on earth, right? As a bit, when you're starting a business, you got to be very cost conscious. I mean, we always joke that you're pretty much looking at your P&L every day because at the beginning you're living and dying off of every sale that comes in the door. And so, hiring sometimes somebody that's requiring a base salary of 100 grand is just unfeasible when you're barely even making any money out of the business. And so, we had a number of folks from Latin America, Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, that were doing a fantastic job for us. And as I said, they may not be the cheapest market on earth. You can find cheaper employees in other countries. Latin America is a great value because they perform at extremely high level. They're time zone aligned to the US. They also have very good understanding of business culture, startup culture, corporate culture in the United States, because many of them have worked for organizations on this side of the border. So those things added up. Plus, many of them have gone to school here or have family here, and so they understand English at a almost native level, which is obviously extremely important when you're trying to give them instructions on what they need to do. Also, just work ethic wise, like very solid. This is kind of an anecdote, but you know, there were recs that I would run in the US where, and granted, we were the staffing company, but no show rates would sometimes get up to like 50%, with candidates showing up to interviews. And in Latin America, we don't really have that problem. I think the highest we've ever seen is maybe 10%. And it's pretty uncommon for them to do that. They very much love to work. They love their work. They love their job. They treat it very well. And obviously, there's great people everywhere and there's not so great people everywhere too. So, but just I think overall, there's a lot of factors that play very well to that market being an effective first couple of hires for your business.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, it's I think the piece that really stood out when you said like the native language thing, that's something I've learned from a couple of friends that I've made in the industry that have helped either with nearshore or offshore. I've kind of learned more of that breakdown in the last year or so for our own business. And then just picking up on some of the nuances there and kind of some of the lingo, it is amazing how much of a difference that makes when you kind of have to like let people kind of go out and recruit and talk to candidates. It's like recruiting is really about the nuance. And I just wanted to highlight that because that is one of the biggest things I've noticed to kind of even use in our own interview process and kind of like evaluate, the talent that we brought on that's near shore and like how quickly they're picking up on that piece and resonate with the candidates. Cause that could be the difference between getting someone to buy in, especially with some of these tough to find roles like construction or civil or something like that, or in like the data center world where it can be competitive. Like that could be the difference between getting
Yep.
the candidate or not getting the candidate.
100%. And it's just one of those things, right? Like there are clients we've had where we have to, it's a US role, like for any number of reasons, right? But a lot of the biggest reason I usually get on that is they want somebody with strong English and they're cautious on Latin America because they're worried what their customer's perception will be if the first interaction they have with their organization is somebody with a very thick accent, right? And I totally get it. I mean, we've all been there where we call into a customer service line and the other person can barely understand us, we can barely understand them, and it's a headache that just grows by the second that we're on the phone, right? And so
Absolutely.
yeah, so having that, and that's something that we obviously screen for. Not everybody's super fluent or anything down there, but there's a good number of them. There's a very large talent pool that is and is also very hungry to work. And there's been a lot of other recruitment companies that have gone down to Latin America. When I've done the recruiting on my own down there, I see a lot of the big names, Robert Half, Randstad.
Yeah.
A lot of those companies have had contract recruiters from that area, and so those people were operating in those environments. Which, if anybody's ever worked in them, knows. I worked at Robert Half for a little while. It's high pace. It is very high metrics. Like nothing else matters other than did you hit your numbers, and many of them survive in those environments for years on end. They
Yeah.
can definitely come operate in your startup and do just fine.
It's my learning ground, training ground was Aerotech for 5 years out in LA. And it's always amazing when I tell some people that didn't really have the big agency exposure. I'm like, yeah, on the West Coast, it was easy. It was 10 meetings a week. On the East Coast, it was 15 meetings a week. And they're like, wait, 10 meetings a week? And then you have kind of like, your donut meetings or your one main meeting, and then you meet three people in the hallway and you count that as a meet, right? You have some
100%.
tricks of the trade and stuff like that. But even if you had like half those were legit meetings, that's 250 every year. I think a lot of people now in the space are like, wait, 250 meetings every year. And so what I'm appreciative about my background there is just like it did ingrain that in me. And then now it's like that is a good limits test for me of like, am I talking to enough people every single day, every single week? And I think there's ways with digital stuff and inbound and everything else that it doesn't have to be meeting for the sake of the meeting anymore. But I am grateful that I kind of have that baked into me that like I need to be meeting with my ICP every single week. Like that's a non-negotiable. But I have people like, oh, I haven't had a meeting in like 4 weeks. I'm like, what? I was like, meet with your best client every week for all I care. Like just do something, like get in front of people. I do appreciate that I did have that ingrained in me because I think that's like the pitfall of a lot of people that I see now. They're like, oh, it's a tough market. I'm like, I don't know if you're actually like if you even are qualified to say that because you're not talking to enough people in your market.
100%. Yeah,
Is it-
I agree, and I think it's something that so many founders, and this is kind of more of my advisor hat, right? So many founders just overlook sales entirely, and they try to exist on a previous book of business and referrals and things like that, and it can take you a ways. People with a really solid network, and they can get into seven-figure range off referrals only, but at some point it's going to stall out, and you have to have a sales engine built. I mean, your business is really it's like a vehicle, right? And the sales component is the engine. So it's like without the engine, you can't really go anywhere. And so many people shortcut that all the time.
it's it's crazy. So, well, okay, let's rewind for a bit because we're gonna keep going down the path. How did you get into? I mean, that's mostly for recruiters, but I kind of started recruiting. How'd you get into the recruiting space to begin with?
Yeah. Ironically, I had gotten a job out of college in a cubicle doing purchasing for a company that, some family worked at. It was a laser company, right? And so kind of a cool job, but I was sitting in a cubicle all day and I realized really quickly, like, this is not where I'm supposed to be. I could just tell. And so a buddy of mine actually talked to me about going into sales, and he worked at a car dealership. I went and worked there for a little while and was doing finance for them and special finance deals, and very bizarre experience. Let's just say that, working at a car dealership. Yeah, I told my mom one day that I just did not love it, that I was going to be moving on. And a guy who was actually booking meetings with clients, who was going to become my boss, went and met with my mom, and she told him, "Hey, listen, Dan, I don't have any recs open right now. I don't really use a recruiter when I do. I've got a very small team, but my son is looking for a job." And so she teed up an intro, and I went and met with them, and that was my first gig. That was at Medix, starting at the very end of 2013. Did mostly healthcare, which became kind of my specialty through most of my career. Started there, was there for a couple years, got promoted into sales after I think a year from recruiting. And then I pretty much worked on biz dev side most of the rest of my career. Robert Half had a little bit of a different model, so kind of did recruiting and sales, but for the most part, that was kind of my start.
I love it. I love it. The my good friend Keely Flood was at Medix for a little bit. And
Yep.
yeah, it's like the Aerotech spinoff and everything else. Like again, like that old school like kind of staffing training, like a good foundational place. To, like really learn some of that, those kind of the KPIs. And you went to like with Robert Half and Beacon Hill, like from kind of the working with the bigger firms, like because a lot of listeners to this podcast haven't had that exposure to working at the bigger firms. Like, what are some of like the pros and cons kind of takeaways that you have from it? That's like things that like were instilled in you, and then we'll kind of start there and kind of things that like maybe like we don't have to do it that way.
Yeah. I think, when I was at Medix, you're exactly right. It was Aerotech spinoff, right? And so
Yeah,
it had kind of the big company feel in terms of what the expectations were, but the culture was very much a small company, right?
yeah,
Like when I was there was maybe 100 employees total across the country, and we used to have like competitions, and we'd have like a big Mario Kart board on the wall,
yeah.
and every start you got, like your car would move forward a couple spaces, and like fun stuff like that, right? And very cool company. Like I really enjoyed my time there. But when I went to Robert Half, which is obviously a monster, Beacon Hill is pretty large too. I'd say the pros are, the support that you get, the training. I had a couple years of experience, which many of my colleagues did not when I went to the training at Robert Half, so I had a leg up on them. But the training was top notch, especially for somebody that was brand new. I mean, it was very hard to beat, just the amount of resources and time that they spent in trying to get you up to speed. I'd say that's probably one of the biggest pros. There's also a lot of people that have been in the industry for 20 years, 25 years that are at those organizations that you're working right alongside of, and it's almost impossible to replicate at a lot of other companies. Those are the pros. The cons, I was seat number 486751 And I felt like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I was a number in a spreadsheet, and that's what they how they looked at it. And I didn't like that. It was actually the realization I had then that I just was not a corporate guy. Like I was not a guy that thrived in a Fortune 500 company. Like that just wasn't me. I didn't like the games. I didn't like the politics. I didn't like any of that stuff. And so I would say those are kind of the pros and cons. Great place to start though. I would highly recommend it to anybody just because you learn how to grind.
Yeah. Very similar experience in terms of feeling and kind of the same thing. And I didn't have the words to articulate that because in some cases it was almost, I just was very naive in my 20s. And it's been even sometimes like kind of hard to like overcome some of the, I would say like maybe the insecurities of like kind of how they make you feel like you should be happy to be a cog in the machine. And again, great training, great, but like it kind of is that like, hey, this is the Kool-Aid's great here. And I just for 3.5 years like, yeah, it is great, isn't it? Because like I didn't know anything else. And then it was like, I had a couple coworkers and turned best friends that were a little bit more like, yeah, this is a fine place to be, but like they kind of had learned kind of from their parents that like that there's other stuff out there, and I never really just like had that exposure or understanding. So it wasn't really until the last year and a half I got like really disillusioned, and it was the same thing, man. Like for me, I decided to quit when I hit my all time high in spread. That week, I was like, okay, I'm here. I can average this out. I could spend what 4 days in Cancun with coworkers and try not to get myself fired because they're just feeding me with booze or something like that. Like that didn't seem like very fun to me either. And like they changed the compensation plan and stuff like that. I was like, what am I doing this for? Like
Yeah.
I like my clients love me. The margins are great. I got like a world class NPS rating. My recruiters are getting promoted. Right, I got recruiters coming to me for advice on how to like get better at their job, and they're not going to their own manager. So I'm like, I clearly have learned some things here. And I was like, I made that move. I was like, I'm gonna quit by the end of the year. It was like July. And I hit my all time high. I was like, I'm gonna quit because when am I gonna do this again next year and the year after? I'm like, no, I've learned what I need. I gotta cut the cord and figure it out. And I didn't know what was next. I just knew it couldn't be that. So like I
Yep.
just resonate with that feeling, man. Like that's all. Like it's yeah.
It's you described it perfectly, man. The other dynamic, and this is a whole other podcast, but I was also really struggling with alcohol back then. And I was in this culture that was literally it was like a frat party had become a business. Like
Yep.
there was beers in the bullpen constantly, and the beers were only supposed to be Fridays after 4. And next thing you know, they're 3 days a week, and they're starting at noon. And you're at clients, and they're drinking beer at lunch, and you're doing the same thing. And it was just like it was a lot, and it was just not a healthy environment for where I was at mentally either.
Yeah.
And so getting out of that was good in many ways.
Yeah, no, good for you. And I feel that was kind of the same thing. I think even looking back, like how I was drinking how much per week? And stuff like that. Like just oh man, now with kids and married and all that, it's just like if I got 2 beers on the Super Bowl because my Patriots were in it, and they got crushed unfortunately this year. But like I was like, wow, I had like one or two. I mean, it was such a crazy. And I think back to like 10 years ago, what that would have been like on a Super Bowl and work and everything. It would have been a way different number. And it's just like I don't need it. I don't need to be successful. I don't need it to fit in or be part of it. Like it's fine. It's like I don't care. People are sober or have a couple of drinks or whatever. It doesn't. It's all good either way. But like yeah, that like kind of being part of it and like what's wrong with you if you don't or don't partake. I don't need this. Like and looking like for this decade, I was like, I definitely haven't needed it to actually to achieve like some of the success that I have, and there's a long way to go, a more to do. It sounds like you kind of like I actually needed the opposite, to be perfectly frank, to be able to actually focus and use most of my energy for all that stuff. So I appreciate you
Yep.
sharing that and being forefront because I I see the conversation changing in that. Maybe it's like a big millennial thing because it was just normal for us. Maybe kind of how we grew up, it was encouraged. So yeah, I don't know
Yep.
about you, man, but it feels a lot more fun being on this side of it. Not completely sober for me, but just like it's not even a thing in my life or priority anymore. It's like if I'm like, oh, I had a drink, it's kind of like a big event, if anything.
Yep. No,
Yeah.
it's yeah, I haven't had anything in almost 9 years, and
For you.
I got to be on this side. Like, I know where that goes if I get on
Yeah,
it. And, but it is something to be cognizant about if there's anybody that's, on the younger side
yeah,
here that's, fresh out of college. And it's like,
yeah,
there's that feeling you have when you leave and you're like, okay, I'm done with college. I got to focus up now. I'm starting my career, right? And then you join a company like that, and it's just like, oh, I can just keep this lifestyle going. And
yeah.
yeah, it catches up to you real quick.
What were and I know we kind of just said this could be a jam session, but what's helped you kind of stay on that path for 9 years? We had to attribute to like one or two things.
Yeah, man. There's a couple things. Number one, I did get some help to quit because it was to the point I couldn't do it on my own. I tried, it was not there. And so thankfully I found a group that does some really, really cutting edge work in that space.
Yeah,
Still friends with the founder to this day. Awesome company, really got me to a point where, I felt incredible and that helps. But I would say a couple things. Really getting, addicts are an interesting group of humans. They're hyper obsessive with things. And so you have to learn how to channel that energy. And
yeah,
so for me, right, I've channeled it into a number of things, some better than others, right? I've channeled it into building a company. Great, right? But there were some very unhealthy periods during that growth, especially at the beginning, working till midnight, 1 in the morning, waking up at 5, right? And doing it all over again, 7 days a week for a year straight, right? And
yeah,
like that was not healthy at all. I was not in a good place. But channeling it into healthier things, right? With like my health, getting obsessed with that, getting obsessed with being a dad, getting obsessed with being the best that I can be at that as well. And then I would say my faith too, right? That's just been another one that has really, I think, grounded me and given me kind of a solid foundation to work from, and focusing there. And then the other one that a lot of addicts go into is like extreme athletics. And so I've been training to do like 50Ks and stuff like that, and I love it, and it's absolutely torture.
yeah.
But it's something that's kind of fun, and it's a much healthier outlet.
That's no, that's awesome. And I think in this day of the hustle coach culture of everything to like extremes, like I appreciate the. It's like I say simple because it's really hard to get there, but it's like I didn't know that stuff. Like I was trying to learn that stuff 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Of like, oh, it's okay to aspire to this thing, like to want to be a dad and to be the best dad possible, like and or to want to own a business and kind of do it, the best way. And it doesn't have to be this like crazy race to anything, but just like trying to do good work every single day and kind of find that harmony. I think balance is kind of a tough word sometimes when you own a business, but I think harmony is one that I can at least relate to. So I appreciate you kind of sharing because I know there's people listening that can kind of fall into that. The recruiting agency recruiter lifestyle can be pretty demanding. As kind of we talked about, it pretty intense, and you kind of feel like you have to do it to fit in. Um,
Yep.
and I've definitely found the people that try not to, like, they seem to be the ones that get it the most. So I've always kind of gravitated towards that and like their stories and learn. It's like you kind of like, yeah, you don't have to do it that way. Like you can just march to the beat of your own drum and like it works. Like as long as it works, for you. And I'm with you on the faith piece. Like for me, that brought a level of peace. That was the final click for me. Like 2019, I was like, oh, that's all I need. Like if I have a sense of peace there, all this other stuff is kind of was just masking everything
Yep.
else. Really, yeah. So
No, it's interesting because I had a very similar moment. I had just gone through a divorce. I was going, through my exit at my company, and I was having some issues with my co-founder and some financial stuff there, that got pretty messy, right? And I started getting these feelings, of this level of anxiety and just angst and just horrible, inability to sleep and all kinds of stuff that I had only felt when I was struggling with alcohol, right? And I was looking at my daughter one day. She's jumping on the bed, and I'm looking at her, and I'm like, I am in no place to be able to take care of you right now. And that was literally the moment I decided I'm out. Like I'm gonna sell my shares, and I'm moving on. And you know, I I knew something was missing then because I was exercising, eating healthy. I had built this company. I had more money than I knew what to do with, right? All these things. But I felt almost just like I did back when I was drinking. And that was the click for me. I started getting really curious about what was that missing component. And not but a few months later, things just lined up and it just started to fit right into place,
That's awesome, man. Yeah, like it's great to hear that. I just love stories like that because I know the peace it's brought me, so I can resonate, kind of feel like the same that it happened for you, and like you realize like just more clarity and like just the gift that you have, like your eyes like opened. And I remember for me, like I was just like nervous to like open the Bible and read it. And like I read the book of my buddy was like, he's a Christian his whole life. He's like, why don't you read the book of Ecclesiastes? I was like, all right. And like I read it, I was like, whoa, like, okay, like now I know why you recommended this one. And even that, it was just like hard, right? Kind of doing all those things. But the more I leaned into it, the more clarity it gave me, the more peace. And that's why, like, people are like, how do you not care about you on LinkedIn and you post all the time, all that? Because it's like, it's just LinkedIn. Like, it's just posting. Like, not a big deal. Like, there's way bigger things out there going on. Like, I'm a speck. I'm an important speck. I've learned that. And just like you are, and we all are important to it. But
Yep.
we're also just like we're like, let's be the best pawn we can be, in a
Yep.
sense. And that's the takeaway I got. And I'm like, it just like clarifies, like, okay, that I can do, like that makes sense to me. So people are like, because I was worried about being a hypocrite, which I realized like that's what we all are. That's actually the ones that we know are flawed, typically kind of drawn into the faith and stuff like that. And
Yep.
I was like, I know I need to be proud of it and preach it. I just don't want to be obnoxious about it. But then, and I think for me, God was like, well, then just keep working on you, right? To get the splinter out of your own eye. I'm like, all right, that I can do. As someone that's from Boston and a loud mouth and not afraid of sharing opinions and everything like that, like that humility was like, it gave me the plan and the humility to like, okay, I can do that. Like that's simple for me, simple enough. Hard to execute still. Don't get me wrong, especially as you have family and marriage and kids and all that stuff, right? It's a lot, but it does, like, the end goal is supposed to be simple, to get
Yep.
there. So, um, yeah, it's
I dig it, man. I'm right there with
yeah,
you.
I love it. Well, we didn't we talk about the business, right? So you left and then you kind of built your own and you got scaled and you kind of mentioned kind of how it ended, but how did that kind of beginning piece go into starting your own firm and kind of the build out from there? Like share a little bit with us on that piece.
Yeah, so I had gone to Beacon Hill to start their healthcare team and had a lot of success doing that. We had a bunch of leadership changes during that time, and there was some new ones that just didn't really like the model of healthcare particularly in Colorado. A lot of the healthcare staffing is contract to hire work, and they really wanted more just like straight up temp, like contracts. They didn't want this contract to hire because it's slower, right? They wanted like, let's lock in 50-person projects of people that are going to work for the next 6 months for us, and let's fill those. And those were just harder to find, and they weren't as common in this area as they were in the finance and accounting, which is what the other part of the team primarily did. And so I had some fundamental disagreements with my boss. They wanted me to go back to doing finance and accounting, which I had done at Robert Half. I didn't really like that world. And so I just knew it was time for me to go. I actually started working for a guy who did coaching, leadership development, speaking, and I was working for him, kind of doing business development, helping to build out his business development system.
Yeah.
And I was also starting my staffing company at the same time, and had brought over several clients. We were doing okay. I was doing kind of both, and then COVID hit, and that guy laid me off from that gig because he was going to have to go back to a full-time job. My clients all stopped hiring, as everybody that was through COVID knows. They all stopped hiring and said, we got to figure out work from home and all this stuff. We don't have time to bring on other people. So everything pretty much disappeared overnight. And I knew I was very close to becoming a dad at that point, and it was kind of my back's against a wall moment. So I said, all right, well, I guess I'm going all in on this because no one's hiring. My clients are all gone. My consulting gig is gone. So the only thing I have to do is just try to figure out a way to make it through, with this staffing company. And so went all in. Took a few months to kind of really figure out the new market because everything shifted during that period.
Yeah.
And we ended up landing a client who did a lot of COVID work. So they did a lot of testing. They had partnered with the Colorado Department of Health, and they were one of the primary vendors for that. And we got, ironically, talking to a candidate, right? And they fed me some information about, here's what I'm doing. Yeah, we're actually hiring, I think, more people here right now. You should reach out. And so I sent the CEO a message on LinkedIn, and I just said, hey man, I can help if you guys are looking to hire more people. He sent me back nothing except for his cell phone number. So I I called him up, and literally within like a couple days, we were signed on to work with them, and that got us going. They ended up becoming an awesome client. We hired hundreds of people for them, and that was that period I talked about of staying up till 1 in the morning and waking up at 5 and doing that. That was when it was just me and my co-founder, and that finally gave us the revenue to hire other people and start doing some stuff. So we brought in a couple of recruiters, finally started shifting some of the work off. And yeah, from there, we just really started to focus in on what we were good at. And, we primarily did clinical and revenue cycle roles within healthcare, mostly contract to hire work. And from there, we just grew. And we topped out, I think, at around 25-ish employees. We had an office in Denver. I had an office we were starting in Tampa Bay, Florida. We had some folks down in Phoenix, Arizona as well. And so I was traveling a ton between all those places and helping get those offices up and running. And yeah, man, it was honestly, it was incredible. It was so much fun. It was hard as hell, but getting to learn the pieces of business that you definitely don't learn as an individual operator or contributor,
Yeah.
were second to none. How operations work and how to care about your finances as a business, and forecasting, and really learning how to hire and manage people, and teach people sales, and being able to let go of the control and let other people actually do their jobs instead of me thinking I need to step in on everything. Like, all of that was an incredible experience. So we did that for little over 3 years, but scaled it up to that in like 2.5 years. We were up to that level, and yeah, it was an incredible experience, and not something that a lot of people get to experience. So I'm very grateful that I was given that opportunity.
I love it. I love it. And were you used to doing your own payroll or doing EO like through EOR? Or like how did you? Because I know back office can kind of work different when you do contract to hire.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we managed our own payroll for our team. We actually did hire a payroll funding and an EOR company.
Yeah.
That did a lot of that for our contractors, because when we're working, especially in a highly regulated industry like healthcare, right, there's certain requirements and laws per state, and we needed somebody that was going to free us up to be able to work across state lines instead of just being focused here. And so we got somebody that could actually allow us to do that. That being said, that expansion was one of the almost fatal flaws in the business at the beginning, was expanding outside of our region too quickly, because, as you know, even if I have an infusion nurse rec in Denver and I have an infusion rec nurse rec in Illinois, those are completely opposite recs, right? They're two
Yeah.
different searches entirely. And so we had to kind of bring that back in and focus here locally. And then that was the expansion where we started actually opening up offices in other regions that could service those areas, where you could actually have a pipeline that you could utilize more effectively with, different clients and things like that. But that was definitely something that, helped us a lot though, too, because they took that headache of running payroll for hundreds of people,
Yeah.
as well as all of the, risk that they took on from us. So definitely something I think is very beneficial when you're trying to grow.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great service, and I've known I've talked to a few EORs, recommended a few of my recruiter clients to some, but I got one that's solo that, I mean, I think he's doing 7 figures and freaking GP like alone this year with one. I mean, he was doing this as a side hustle 3 years ago. So like it's crazy what you can do with the right connections, right, the right placements, and some of those he's doing like long term contracts in like clinical biotech kind of space. So it could be like 5-10 year contracts. So like it can just start to like really stack up. And EOR, for those if you don't know, it's employer of record. And there's like a few different options out there. I mean, you could message Austin or myself if you have more questions about that. I'm sure we can give you some names if that's something that you're looking into, potentially having contractors on your books. Yeah, it's a great way to kind of get started there. What was the all time high you guys hit? And like we did weekly spread at Aerotech GP. I don't know if you did like weekly or monthly or whatever else, but like what was the that all time high on the like the Wednesday report or whatever, Friday report that you
Yeah,
guys hit? Yeah.
we had our EOR did our gross profit report, so they actually invoiced our clients for us too, and then they would actually collect those payments, and then they would send us, our GP, which was, you know, pretty easy experience, except they do take their cut and all that stuff. But there
It
was
ain't free.
we
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
ain't free for sure. But no, I mean when we hit our first like 7-figure month, uh, I just I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen numbers that big
Yeah.
in front of me. And yeah, I think our top month ever was like 2.2, something like that. 2.2 million in a month, and yeah, I mean that was incredible to see, and
That's
just to be a part of it and realize that like this was my baby that I had built. That was
yeah.
pretty awesome.
That's awesome, man. It's super cool. It's super cool. And yeah, it is fun. You get kind of those phases and work on certain projects, and it kind of goes by in a flash. Although every day kind of seems super long, and it's yeah, just kind of learning the lessons of like keeping your top skill sets, right? Focusing on regionally. If you can't place that 1% at this company, making sure you have 5 other area people in the companies in the area that they could go to, and kind of I'm hearing like repeatable skill sets was a big reason to be able to scale, to scale, having the right, partners, be able to kind of, alleviate some of the headaches, like, kind of looking back, like, well, yeah, what were kind of the biggest lessons that you learned that you kind of now kind of apply and coach founders on now in terms of like pitfalls to avoid and kind of main things to kind of focus on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. I'd say one is definitely it's really easy when you're starting out to say yes to things you should not say yes to. And it feels like I have to in that moment. But what it ends up doing is it ends up diluting what you're actually able to provide to others. Not only are you going to be spending time on that bad fit, but you also have to change things. For example, we had a client that was actually that COVID client. They came to us and asked us if we would do these vaccination sites, right? And these were like crazy projects where they would call me on Tuesday and say they needed 500 people for Saturday, right? And we'd have to have a list to them by Thursday night. And I said yes to it. And we did it for a while. And while we were making a ton of cash off of it, we had to change the entire business to be able to function in an environment where we were having to turn 500 heads in 2 days, right?
Crazy.
Instead of filling projects where we were placing there'd be a site or a clinic, right, that needed 4 or 5 people, or a project where we were going to place 20 people, right? Those were different than 500, and it started to stress things within the business, and it started to make things very difficult. I had to shift people over from what they were doing. We started to lose actually good clients because of this, and I actually ended up having to finally turn it down and just say, guys, we can't keep doing this. This is not in our wheelhouse. And it's a very much a lesson in saying yes to the right things and saying no to everything else,
Yep.
because those things will absolutely burn you. And I see founders do it all the time when they're feeling the stress of cash and they say yes to things that are definitely not what they should be saying yes to. That's one for sure. The other one I would say is making sure you do the fundamentals, like sticking to the basics. It's really easy to start foregoing little things like making sure you put one-on-ones on the calendar with your team and keeping true to those, taking that feedback and actually putting something behind it, like taking that
Mhm.
feedback and actually making some implementations and changes within the company, because your people are telling you things and you can either hear it and say, okay, or you can hear it and do something about it. And those are two very, very different things. And it only happens because of the basics, right? Like doing those basic things consistently. Those are never, they seem like easy things to move when you're running around at a million miles an hour and working crazy hours. Like, I can just meet my team next week, right? That one on one. And just next thing you know, it gets pushed back 4 or 5 times. And suddenly that complaint that would have been addressed to you is pushed under the rug and never addressed. And suddenly there's resentment building, right? That was another one I would say for sure. And then the final one is your best, and this is something I actually talked to a client in the staffing industry about, is you have only so many really strong performers, right? And the more that you can take off of their plate, the better. And what I mean by that is so often in the staffing industry, you'll get an awesome recruiter on your team, right? And they come in and they're killing it. And they start to cap out at a point because there's so many candidates that they have out working on their payroll and on their billings that they're dealing with customer service like 70% of their week, right? Or they're dealing with payroll issues 70% of the week. And what a lot of people do is just say, okay, well, we need to hire another recruiter. That's just part of the job, right? And I think that's the wrong thinking. I think that if you want that person who has already proven they can kill it, bring in somebody that can offload all of that nonsense, right? So actually had a customer service person, right? And also like a sourcer or an admin for that person who can do all of the stuff that they absolutely hate doing, because they love placing people. They love having interviews. They love finding that person the perfect job. What they don't like is all that nonsense and all that minutia that gets built in with that. And if you can clear that off, they will be 1,000 times happier. They will be 1,000 times more productive, and they can go 2 or 3 times the distance where they could if you didn't hire those people. And this is exactly where, like, I have some clients sometimes that come to me and they say, I get hiring from Latin America is great and all, but like, I feel like I'm betraying, my fellow American by giving a job that could go to them to somebody in Latin America. And I get that sentiment 100%. Here's what I would say. Most of the clients I work with have their core team in the States. And a lot of times what they do is they hire people that support that team from Latin America. And granted, they could say that job could go to somebody in the US, but here's what I would say. A lot of times you can't afford that person. And so your best employees are being burdened down by something that may cause them to leave. And for a pretty nominal fee, right, you could pay somebody that can take on a lot of that work from them and can make them twice as effective and more happy in their engagement, right? And so bringing on that type of staff and that flex staff can be a really effective way at making your business 10 times more effective.
Yeah, and I would add that like you're not taking up a spot on the actual like land itself, right? It's like virtual, so it's a different piece than necessarily like hiring being here and stuff like that, right? I mean, it's less of a there's no physical necessarily investment in kind of bringing people here, which makes a difference, right? And like, because that can have more of like kind of a domino effect. So I think even just like to your point, supporting the team locally, make sure you don't lose people here, right? By just kind of sticking maybe a little too hard to that principle and creating almost like a worse domino effect for yourself as
Yep.
well. I think with like virtual, it's just like it's like a little bit more like normal, I would say, like with at least the virtual piece of it.
Yep.
And in doing that, you could create more jobs domestically, right? If to your point, if all things kind of work, then you can scale up for all the roles, like both here and near shore.
Exactly.
So like not
And
missing
that's
the bigger picture. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what most of the time I see people do, right? Is like they'll bring in these folks to support their current team. They're able to be way more effective. Now we can drive revenue and grow 2 times. Now we have 2 times the amount of staff in the States that we wouldn't have had we not hired these 4 or 5 folks from Latin America that are there to support, right? Now you've actually created more jobs. And
Yep.
so, there are some ways that, because that is something that I've even wrestled with a little bit as we started doing this on,
Same here.
is this the right thing, right? And as I've seen it play out, I think in the long run, I think it actually makes more jobs, as you just mentioned.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I've had the same on a smaller scale. Just it's kind of the same debate. And I think that's where I landed. I think you articulated much better than I ever did. So appreciate that. But it's kind of, that's what I've seen too. It's allowed us to, now if we have a couple people here strategically, it actually has allowed me to bring back people that I had in the States
Yep.
because of that. So I'm actually like living proof on our side of things that that's can have exactly that effect.
Yep.
Well, as we wrap up, my last question is 2026. We got this year, got the rest of the. I mean, already in the second half of the decade, which is pretty nuts. But what are you kind of telling the founders, seeing for yourself to like? Obviously, AI is kind of the big thing out there. It can be AI related or not AI related, but like, what do you have on your radar? What are you looking down? Kind of 12 months, 18 months, couple years, talking about like internally and with founders that you're working with that people may or may not be thinking about.
Yeah. I think there's a number of things. I think there is a lot of anxiety about what AI is going to do to the landscape. And I've wrestled with this thought myself a lot of times. Like, what am I? If it takes all the jobs, what happens to the recruiters, right? I would say there's a couple things. Number one, lean into the more human side of everything. And honestly, this is something that I think the world needs more of right now, anyway. And what I mean by that is it's so easy to get caught up in the just hitting my metrics and just doing this and posting on LinkedIn and sending out DMs and doing all of these things as like it's just part of the job, right? It's a scorecard item that I'm checking off, right?
Yeah.
Really leaning into building more human connections and being that individual, because I think if you're worried about those things, which is a very valid fear right now, the people that I think are going to be the best, whatever happens with AI and everything else, are going to be the folks that are really good at that human component, right? The connector, because that is something that even if AI took off and completely is doing the recruiting process, the one thing it's not going to be able to do is tap into a really solid network of people that trust you, right? Like, it can't do that. It just simply can't. It can't do that part. It also can't be the person that just really understands their clients at a fundamental level and can meet somebody and say, yep, I know exactly which company this person's going to, because I know right off the bat, even if their skill set's not exactly right, they are the type of person that works in that environment really well, right? If I can be that person, there's no AI that's doing that,
Yeah.
and probably will not be able to do that. And so I would say continue to lean into the human side of those interactions. And I think that's true, honestly, for really any business, is just continue to lean into that human side of it, build those relationships, maintain those relationships, keep in touch with those people. And I always used to have a saying that there's only so many good people in the world, like hold on to them, and I
Yeah.
think that's more true today than ever.
Amen. I couldn't agree any more with that sentiment. The only thing I would add to that, because you were on that track that I've thought about, is even if AI can do the relationship piece, I bet you what's going to happen is people still won't want AI to do it for them. I think that could be where the line is drawn. It's like, I get AI could replicate this, all that. I still want to deal with a human, right? There's people that are going to have that preference. And I think that might be some of what these AI experts are missing, is like, sure, it can do a lot of these things and maybe it can do more, but at some point humans are going to want to talk to humans no matter how amazing AI can be. Um,
Yep.
I think there's just part of that in our nature that will never go away. Um, and
Yep.
yeah, and just to be open to the evolution of it, I think it's fundamentally going to change. Like I read like a great article. It's like when oil was there forever, we just didn't know how to utilize it for a long time. Right? It's kind of AI. It's like it's here, but we're still learning how it's gonna be best leveraged, right, as a
Yep.
resource. So don't get too scared. Don't get too over optimistic. Just to your point, pay attention, get to know people, like network, and like just kind of see where the opportunities are, because that's the one constant is these changes always create opportunities
Yep.
for people as well. So no,
They do, man.
dude, I couldn't agree more. And dude, this is awesome. Like, appreciate you being on here, being honest and transparent, and just kind of sharing what's up and keeping it real. And just congrats on like the success that you've had and building companies and kind of what you're working on, now with strategy ladders. And glad that we got the chance to meet and talk shop.
Absolutely, brother. Thanks for the opportunity, man. It was a pleasure to finally meet you in person. And yeah, man, really
Likewise.
appreciate the chance to be here.
course, of course. Well, we're gonna have your LinkedIn URL in the episode summary. So connect with Austin, book a call with his team. If you want to learn more, if you learn to scale and all that good stuff. There's like a wealth of like free resources on his LinkedIn profile and all that. So check that out. Connect with him. If you got value from this, give us some love, 5 stars, follow, subscribe, download, all that good stuff. And until next time, happy hunting, y'all.